Tim Cysewski, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I got to say, some of my earliest memories growing up wrestling in Illinois were watching the Midlands or going to the Midlands. The first memory I have, my dad recorded it one year and I watched it. I think it was like 98, 99. And then for Christmas every year, my mom would get us tickets to go to the Midlands. And I'll just never forget the great memories coming up and watching the tournament in the 2000s. So it's an honor to have you on.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a great tournament. I grew up with it also.
Yeah, let's start at the beginning for you. How'd you get involved with the sport?
Well, it was my first real organized sport was gymnastics. So I was involved in gymnastics for a couple of years, 7th and 8th grade, and all of a sudden a friend of mine said, "Hey, let's do this wrestling stuff. It's only on weekends. The Park District is offering it, and it's on Saturday. So we would have one practice on Saturday." We said, "Hey, what the heck, why not?" So myself, my brother, my twin brother, and your younger brother Danny, and this guy named Billy Davids, we got in his car, or they took us over to the high school, and we just started the Park District. Walt Sherman was the coach, and there was probably about 15 of us, and we just started getting, he started teaching us the basics, and I'm saying, "Hey, I kind of like this." And then they had the state series, so I got downstate, and I said, "No, it's kind of fun," and I remember I wrestled. I tied for 4th place, and I lost a flip for 3rd, which kind of bothered me because I wanted to win that thing straight up, or at least win the last match. So I said, "Hey, I like this though." I said, I'm going to continue this in high school, and I did. I went to Glenbrook South High School. My twin brother stayed with gymnastics because they were different seasons, or the same season. So I stayed with wrestling, and that was one way we can split ourselves up identity-wise, because we're exact identical twins. So even to this day, if you saw us, you probably would say, "Wait, well, who's who here?"
Really?
Yeah. So I stayed wrestling. He stayed with gymnastics, and I just loved it. Loved the contact. Loved the dictating my hey, I'm going to win because of me, not because of somebody else. And same thing. If I lose, it's my fault. It's not somebody else's fault. So I really enjoyed it.
When you were coming up at Glenbrook South at the time, who were some of the top teams in Illinois at the high school level?
Well, back then it was only one. Everybody was in one class. It wasn't the 3 classes they have now. So it was one class. Everybody, small schools, big schools, we all competed against each other's. Waukegan was good. East Leiden was good. Who else was pretty good all the time? A couple schools in the southern, DeKalb, was good. So, those schools, North Chicago was awesome. They were unbelievable, and we competed against a lot of those same schools. Evanston was very good.
Yeah, the one division's crazy.
Yeah, it was fun. Winner take all, and Proviso East, they all were very good. So it was great. You knew if you won the state championship, you were the guy. You didn't have to share it with anybody. That's the only thing bad about things now. You have multiple state champs, and I understand the reasoning behind it, but still, you can say, "Hey, I'm the guy." California, I think, is one of the last states that have only one state champ per weight class, and they're a pretty big state, and you're going to get a pretty good quality kid out of there no matter what. If they place in the top 5 or 6, that's a pretty good kid. But Illinois is one of the better states to recruit out of anyways right now.
Yeah. Indiana, I think, is still has one class, maybe Jersey.
Yeah, you might be right.
Many,
Indiana still may have it. No, there's less than a handful. They're getting fewer and fewer.
So when you took 4th as a junior, was that something that motivated you going into the next year, or were you just happy to place at that point?
No, I felt I should have done better. So I definitely wrestled a lot of international stuff. I did a lot of freestyle because I told myself when I got into wrestling, I said, "What's the ultimate? Besides being a state champ, national champ, conference champ, Olympics. Hey man, that's what you want. Shooting for the Olympics, win a gold medal." So that was always in the back of my mind. I said, I want to be on an Olympic team, or at least I want to be in that situation where I can be on world teams. And ultimately be, be part of representing your country at the weight class. So you're the best guy at that weight class in the United States, at that representing the United States. And so that kind of drove me to make sure if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this all the way. So I learned, my first freestyle tournament, I was probably a freshman in high school. A friend of mine did a little freestyle. And he said, yeah, let's go to this freestyle tournament. I had no idea what it was, had no idea. And I found out real quick, I was 2 and out pretty quick, but I watched and kind of figured, I figured this thing out. And I loved it. I mean, freestyle was a lot of fun, and got to be pretty good at it, and made a couple of world teams and Pan Am teams, and missed out on the Olympics in '80, but that's another story.
Yeah, I was looking at the world teams when you were there. I noticed you made it in 78, and I was like, all right, you're at 136 and a half. So I was looking at who made it the years before and the years after. The years before, it looked like Jim Humphrey was the guy, but the years after, that weight class changed hands pretty rapidly until John Smith got there.
Yeah, John was there, but myself was there quite a bit. Humphreys and I went back and forth. I mean, he was 1 year he beat me out. I was behind him. He was a silver medalist in the World Championships that year in Switzerland. So, and they brought me along so I can get some experience and just get used to everything. And it was a great experience. But yeah, Jim and I go way back. We used to go back and forth. And the following year, when I made the world team, he was at 149. He went up a weight class. Wow. So, that gave me an opportunity to wrestle internationally at the World Championships.
And it was like Andrea Metzger was in there as well, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Maybe Randy Lewis. Like Randy some Lewis legends.
Yes. Yeah. All three of us were pretty much that was our round robin, it seemed like, in almost every tournament in 79 and 70 and 80 for the most part. And then Metzger, I think he went up, he might have went up to 49, or they did some Greco too, but Randy and I would go back and forth quite a bit.
And in 80, everyone knows what happened. We didn't go to the Olympics. How early in that year did you guys know that it wasn't happening?
We didn't know till the final trials. We were literally at Binghamton College. The final trials were there. And they were going through the final trials. There was no indication at that point that we were going to boycott at all. So we were going through the process of elimination. So we had the elimination, and we come down to the finals, and we had basically the first and second guys, or two guys were going to wrestle off for the spot. And so Randy and I were one of those guys. Ben Peterson and Chris Campbell, I believe, in there, and John was in there. And it was a great group of teams, and top 20 guys. We didn't know till probably the day of weigh-ins that we weren't going to go, no matter what happened. And Gable brought us all off to the side and say, listen, whatever happens, we're going to wrestle this thing off and pick the team, and have the team so we know what the team is, just in case they change their minds. And it was kind of a bummer, because we had figured they're not going to change their mind. They pretty much publicly said we're not going. So, but okay, we'll play the game with it and wrestle it off. And Randy and I we went best of 3 and went all 3 matches. And I made a mistake in the 3rd match, and he beat me, and rest is history. But it was a good rivalry. We had a lot of fun. It was a bummer we didn't get to go Olympics, but you couldn't see that coming down the road. When you set your goal to make an Olympic team when you're 12, just started wrestling, you don't see a boycott coming. Fortunately, I was able to make a lot of U.S. teams, toured a lot. Russia just a year before, wrestling over there, so had a lot of experience traveling that way, and that's what I'm thankful for that.
What was your first impression of the Soviet Union when you went over to Tbilisi?
Oh boy, I heard all about Tbilisi. Gable used to picked his brain when said, "What do I expect?" And they said, "Bring a lot of peanut butter." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, they don't have food over there is okay, but you're gonna miss things like peanut butter and comfort food that you normally would have." I said, "All right." So I brought some peanut butter over there and some other stuff. But the biggest thing I was surprised at, at that time, we're in the middle of a Cold War. We're going to the moon, and you know, the rocketry stuff is everybody going back and forth. And you figure, oh, you know, technology, they're pretty much the same as us in a way, you know. You get over there, their standard of living was unbelievable. They were still having, you know, and when we wrestled a lot of dual meets, we weren't in like downtown Moscow. We were in the suburbs, and downtown the suburbs, you had the cabs and a few cars, but mostly donkey carts and that kind of stuff where they were still getting around in.
No,
you know?
in the 70s?
Yeah. It just surprised me that how backward that economy was at that time, and probably still is to a certain extent. I was just surprised. I thought it'd be more like us, you know, because you figure they're sending people, you know, around the moon, around the earth, all this, you know, rocketry stuff. And, you know, they're a world power when it comes to, you know, arms race. And you figure out the standard of living was going to be okay. It wasn't at all. I mean, they treat us great, you know, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't what we're used to, you know, which surprised me in a way. I mean, it really surprised me, you know. We had, you know, they were very generous when guests and stuff to us and stuff, but it was just surprising that how they got around. They got around with, on trams and trains. The cars weren't very well. You know, they were terrible. You know, they break down quite a bit if you're lucky. A lot of buses. They took a lot of buses, a lot of mass transit like that, but it wasn't what you're used to.
Yeah, and like knowing Tbilisi was in Georgia, that's kind of a more remote republic.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
south of the Caucasus even, you know, so you're out there on the skirts a little bit.
Yeah. We flew in there from Moscow. It's interesting. Everything flying in and flying out of Russia at that time was through Moscow. So that was the main hub. Not like the United States, we have hubs all over the place. But anytime you go into Russia, at least back then, you flew into Moscow and then flew out to different places, to Tbilisi or wherever we had duels. So we would fly into Moscow, stay overnight, fly to Tbilisi, wrestle for 2 days there in their tournament, fly back to Moscow. And then we would have some dual meets throughout the country. We would fly out of Moscow. You know, it was pretty interesting, you know, on that kind of stuff.
That's cool. Yeah. And so the Beloglazovs, were they like Sergey was a weight below you, or like who were the Soviet studs at that time at your weight?
Oh, I don't think he was still younger. I didn't never got to wrestle him.
He was still on the come up at that point?
Yeah, he was still, yeah. But they were good. They were really good, you know. Man. But yeah, we would work out. We didn't get to work out with them that much. Nowadays, they probably work out a little bit more with, you know, when you come and tour. Back then, they didn't work out with us at all. You know, all they did is let us use their facilities a little bit, which is always kind of interesting. You know, you figure, again, goes back to facilities. You know, we have pretty nice facilities, plumbing and heat and locker rooms and stuff. Their facilities, at least the ones we used, they were nice, but they weren't nearly what you expected to have. I mean, they were kind of cold, like a big gym. The mats were, you know, the thicker mats. They're either horsehair mats or Spieth Anderson type mats, thicker ones. You know, they're, again, something as easy as going to the bathroom is totally different than what you're used to. You know, it's basically, to be frank, it's basically was a hole in the floor, and that was it. You know, and it was definitely eye opening. The times, and I went there twice. I've been to Russia, to Tbilisi twice. I had to take a year off. First year I went was great. Second time, no, I'm not going to go. Then I went again the third time, which is, again, it was a good experience.
Yeah, Kerry Cole and this is, you know, I don't even think this is Tbilisi, and this is, you know, 20 years after you went, but he was like, when you go to international tournaments, you take things for granted, like even like hot water in the showers. Like those dudes take cold showers, they don't think anything of it. And we are tiptoeing around it, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. They're again, the way they do things and comfort zones, it's a totally different ballgame. Now it's probably changed a little bit since then. You like to hope so, but yeah, it's definitely not what people think it is over there.
Yeah. Well, and before, you know, your international career, 1972, you're a senior in high school. You win the state championships. And later that August, the great Dan Gable in that amazing 72 team puts on a performance that we're still talking about today. Had you watched the Olympics before that, like in the 68 games, or was that 72 in Munich the first big one for you?
that was pretty much the first big one. I mean, again, I didn't really know, you know, watch wrestling. They didn't really have a lot of it televised at that point, in the Olympics. Gable was kind of the first group with Peterson brothers and Chris Taylor. So there was a lot of excitement about this team, and especially with Dan. And I remember watching. I was at Iowa. I was a freshman in Iowa in my freshman dorm, and we started school in August. So I had a small black and white TV on my desk. So I'm watching him winning his matches in the Olympics and the rest of the guys. And that was great to see. And I knew at that time, because Gary Kermeyer was the head coach, he wrote us a letter about a week, or a note about a couple of weeks before we reported to school, says, hey, your new assistant coach is Dan Gable, so watch him on TV. So we didn't know, I'm going, holy smokes, we didn't know he was going to be the assistant coach at that time. But then we get a note from Gary saying, hey, we just signed Gable. He's going to be your assistant coach. So watch him on the two, hopefully winning gold medal. And that was fun. And then, like I said, I watched it. Week later, he's back in practice. He's back there running practice for us. It was awesome.
So you had already committed before Gable was even named coach or anything. This is all news to you after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he knew he was going to Iowa before the Olympics. I didn't know that either.
I think, whether he knew he was going to be there, it just wasn't, if he did, he didn't say anything to anybody. But, when I was in school that freshman year, Kermeyer wrote a note. Now, it might have just been, on the QT a little bit across the board. But, I mean, the first I heard about it is when I got to know from Gary, from Kermeyer. And then I'm going, oh, shit, this is great. Gable's going to be one of our coaches. And then, then when he showed up, I'm going, oh my God, talk about jaw dropping, not just mine, but everybody else, but here I am a freshman watching this guy, I remember one time, what's the year he lost it. He lost it to Owings at
69
at Northwestern McGaw Hall.
Yeah.
And my dad told me, he says, I like this Owings guy. I said, Dad, you're crazy. He's never going to beat Gable. Gable's unbelievable, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I like his attitude. He dropped 2 weight classes to come down to wrestle Gable. I think he got a shot at beating him. I said, Dad, you're nuts, And we went to Northwestern to watch the finals there. Well, I was there I watched the whole NCAAs, and just awesome. It was great. And sure enough, Gable gets beat. I'm going, unbelievable,
You were there.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It was unbelievable. It was fun.
Oh my gosh. Was it just pandemonium when he lost, or?
Well, people couldn't believe it. At first, people were going to say, hey, he's going to win this still. He'll see, find a way to, because Gable always won. We saw him in Midlands that year and, beat up everybody. And, he got there and things just weren't hitting. He was trying to make things happen and just things weren't falling his way. And he got beat, and back then, if you have 2 minutes riding time, you got 2 minutes of a point. You get 2 points. So every minute of riding time you had beyond your opponent, you got an extra point. Now it's only 1 point. But then if you had 3 minutes, you got 3 points. Well, Gable had 2 minutes of riding time on Owings, and that still wasn't enough for him to win the match. And Dan just wrestled sloppy. I think he got distracted with the interviews he was doing, which is weird because he's done interviews before, and but it just was a lot of distractions, I think.
So you really truly grew up though during Gable Mania, though. I mean, being in Illinois, the Midlands were a big part of his career, and wow. So that was 70, I think, not 60, and I was wrong there. So 70 was that NCAAs at Northwestern, I believe.
Yeah.
So when you get to Iowa and you start working with him, what are your first impressions of Coach Gable as a coach?
Well, I kind of stood off a little bit. I think he's 145, 154, 145 pounds, and I'm only a freshman. I said, I got to work my way into this here a little bit, So I would watch him a little bit and talk to him a little bit and just talk to him with a group. Never, but once you got to know him, he got to know you, which was, easy going. I had a lot of fun, taught a lot, never yelled at us. We gave him a lot of reasons to, but he never yelled at us. He always very, very encouraging. He worked our butts off, that's for sure. And if he told us to do something, guess what? We did it. no question asked. You know, hey, if it's good for, if he's telling you to do something, there's a reason for it. You know, and who's going to argue with Gable, who's an Olympic medalist, and he still can kick the shit out of you? Yeah, I'm gonna do what he tells me to do. You know, and that's across the board. That's from the big guys to the little guys.
And was J Rob there that first year too?
J Rob was, if he wasn't my freshman year, he was there my second year. But he came in as like a grad assistant for about at first, and then he worked his way onto the staff. Yeah, but we had that was a good staff too. I mean, Jay was there. Kurtemeyer was the head coach for the 4 years that I was there. And then
You still there? Sorry, cut out. I
yeah,
can cut that
yeah, I'm
out
here.
though. No problem. So and I was gonna ask you about this, but you kind of let into it. You said Kurtemeyer, I'm sorry, Gary Kurtemeyer was the head coach the whole 4 years you were there. How involved was he with practices, or like was it Gable running the show?
No, you know, they would run the show. They kind of, I think Gary at first, you know, did a lot, and I think that as things got moving, you know, and Gable felt more comfortable with everybody and how things run, he ran a lot of it. But Gary would, you know, always be involved in technique and running the pro. You know, they worked well together. You know, they obviously talked what they wanted to accomplish that day. You know, it was great. Things worked very well, at least from my standpoint.
And how long until you guys started winning national titles?
Well, my freshman year, we went in there. We never won the Big Ten championships up to that point, and we never won the NCAAs up to that point. So my freshman year, we won. That was the first year we won. Let me remember now. For my freshman year, it was at Minnesota. I qualified for nationals. I believe we won we didn't win the Big Tens that year. My freshman year, we took second again, you know, and we were top 10 team wise. And then my sophomore year, we won the Big Ten championships. And that's when they started that streak of winning the Big Tens for like 20 years straight from then on. I won the Big Tens, and then the NCAAs, we won the NCAAs. We were fifth my sophomore year, and then my junior and senior year, we won the NCAAs.
Wow.
And then they won, you know, a couple of NCAAs even after that. So my sophomores, my junior and senior year, we were NCAA champs and Big Ten champs.
And that's like you said, the run of, you know, the craziest thing is that J Rob at Minnesota in '99 was the first team to break that streak after all those years. It's like, wow, a lot of history there.
Yeah. I mean, it's like things just kept moving. You know, it just caught on fire. The fans came like crazy. I mean, I remember Kurtemeyer's, you know, we said, we're going to wrestle Iowa State, you know, my freshman year. That's what it was, because Iowa and Iowa State never wrestled. They hadn't wrestled for like 20 years. I don't know why. It just didn't happen. So Gary and Nick got together, and they got the duels going. And back then we used to wrestle home and away. So we wrestled home and away, and they beat the heck out of us both times. I mean, both times. And then we finally turned it around my sophomore year. So, and then we never looked back. We turned it around. Yeah.
And think about what we just watched last night. Like that's still, that was pretty amazing. And, you know, it's still a lot of history from those early years. Yeah.
It was great. I mean, we went from, you know, normal duels. We had maybe a few hundred people watching it. And we went from that to, you know, in Iowa, our first dual meet was, you know, over 12,000 people there. It was unbelievable. You know, then we would go Carver Hawkeye, or not Carver Hawkeye. We went to the, you know, Ames, and it was the same thing. We had, you know, 14,000 people there. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was great, you know.
And for you coming from Illinois, you know, not kind of expecting this when you're going to Iowa, it had to be pretty amazing just to kind of be a part of all this and see it transpire in front of your eyes.
Yeah, it's great to be on the ground floor in a way, and just you see things develop that way. Like, holy smokes, one guy, can you tell yourself, one guy makes the difference here. Dan Gable makes the difference. But then you look back and it says it was more than just Dan. It was Gary having the foresight of getting Dan to be part of that program. And it's Roy Carver, who was a big money guy. He and Gary, became very good friends, and he was the catalyst to get Dan there, or a lot of reasons to get Dan there and get then J Rob there, and then the club was a big part of that. But that Carver kind of initiated a lot of that stuff with Gary, saying, hey, here Gary has the big dream. Here's Carver, said, hey, okay, let's make this thing happen, and they did.
Yeah. And then when you graduated, did you know you were going to stay on as the Hawkeye Wrestling Club coach?
Well, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, because after the Olympic thing, it was kind of a bummer. I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. Do I want to keep competing? Do I want to move on? And they came to me and said, hey, Tim, we'd love to have you run the club. And I said, I'll do it. I'll give you a full year, and we'll evaluate after that what we want. I'll figure out what I want to do after that. And so yes, that was kind of gave me the experience of running a club or a program, and it gave me a lot of thinking. Say, hey, maybe I'll keep doing this, because I didn't see myself as I called myself people like a lifer. I couldn't see myself, at least going through college, saying, okay, I'm going to go college and then go into coaching. I figured I get my degree was in business administration. I figured I'll go into business, do this, and maybe stay in wrestling as a side thing, just give back. And things just evolved. Like asking me to run the club and being part of the club. Okay, I like that. I saw the value in it. And then I had an opportunity at Northwestern. They came and approached me during Midlands. And said, hey, would you be interested in interviewing for the assistant coach job here? I said, I didn't know you guys had any assistant coaches at Northwestern. Said, well, we don't, but they're going to start funding it next, this coming year. Would you be interested? I said, heck yeah, let me think about it. And I was just got married just that year, and I was talking to my wife. She was working in Cedar Rapids, and I said, hey, I got an opportunity, maybe to go to Chicago and be assistant coach at Northwestern. What do you think about it? And she kind of thought about it. She said, hey, let's, she was able to, her company had the headquarters in downtown Chicago. So she was able to talk to them, and she was able to get transferred there. So once we figured that was going to work, then I said, okay, I called Northwestern and said, hey, I'm in, I'll be there whenever you tell me to be there. So that kind of evolved that way. And then the hardest part was telling Gable I was leaving. And I delayed that for as long as I could, because I was afraid he was going to talk me into staying, but I just knew I had to move on if I wanted to really explore this coaching thing and really get into it, which I did enjoy doing. I had to break away, and I did.
What did Gable say?
He was surprised. He said, well, why don't you come to me sooner? I said, damn, you would have talked me out of it. And, and I didn't want, I didn't want that risk. I just knew it was the right time to go. And we had, looking back on it, it was a tough decision, but it was the best decision.
And being a Chicago suburb guy, that's kind of like a dream job.
Well, yeah. I mean, I knew, it's kind of funny. When I went to school at Iowa, we had more starters from Illinois on the Iowa team than Iowa did. So when we wrestled Illinois University down in Illinois, there was more Illinois guys on that team, our Iowa team at that time. Mm-hmm. It's kind of evolved out of that now, but that's how it was at that time. They really recruited a lot of Illinois area people, and plus it's far enough away from home, but yet close enough so you can go back and forth. But yeah, things kind of just worked itself out.
Did King Kraft ever call you in high school?
Yep, he recruited me. I used to go to Northwestern all the time, wrestle for and work out with those guys with the Mayor Daley Youth Foundation. They had a club there, and the club would train at Northwestern, I think, twice a week. they would train at different places in the Chicagoland area. Harper College, they would be out there a couple on Saturdays or something like that. So they had different locations. They on Tuesdays it'd be at Deerfield High School. So I would bounce around. I said, this is great. This is in high school, especially. I was able to get my hands on college guys and see, hey, what's this all about? To really measure yourself, especially if you think you're pretty good in high school. Okay, let's see what the college guys look like, feel like, and the guys even outside of, who graduated already. And you got you got a pretty good perspective of where you had to go, and they had great. Terry McCann was the coach, and he's an Olympic champion. He was a coach at the Mayor Daley Club, and great guy, taught a lot, and he was an ex-Iowa guy. So there was a certain comfort zone there too. But still, he's a good coach. But we used to go to Northwestern, and Northwestern was, like I said, we would go there, and Ken was there all the time. And Mark Massery was there a lot of that. Andre Allen was there a lot. So I got to wrestle with a lot of these guys and learn a lot with those guys and just expose. And I still was in high school. So when I got to college, I felt pretty good about my development going into things, even though it was still Iowa, and that's still a big hurdle. But I still felt I was pretty work ethic wise. I kind of knew what was going to happen, how things are going to go. So I wasn't intimidated. At least I didn't think I was, of going into the college atmosphere from that standpoint.
I'm so glad you brought up the Mayor Daley Club, because I've always heard about that. I never really knew how it was structured. So
yeah,
it was like a youth deal, or like a kind of like a freestyle club, or.
Well, I tell you, it's one of the first. It was like New York AC, but it's funded by Mayor Daley, the senior, and they had, there are people that I don't know how they pitched it, but they were funded by the Mayor Daley Youth Foundation, and they did track and field, they did wrestling, they did probably a few other things, but so Terry McCann was the head coach there. They had a few other coaches that were Olympians also, and the word just got out. I can't even remember how I found out about it. With Navy Pier, they used to work out on Navy Pier every Monday. You used to go down Navy Pier. It's not there anymore, but you just go down Navy Pier, and you used to roll the mats out. You roll them out. Terry McCann would run practice, and it was a heck of a practice, and teach technique and all this kind of stuff. Then we roll mats back up, and come back, the following Monday, I think, or Tuesday. But again, that was one of 3 to 4 different places we used to go, but it's the same thing. And they used to they used to win the AAU nationals all the time,
Really?
And when the Federation took in charge, they used to win that too. So it was a pretty good organization.
Now, at this time, I'm going to throw a couple of names at you, and I honestly don't know if they're involved, but was Bill Wick involved at all during this time?
Oh, Bill Wick. He was one of my favorite guys, man. Talking about a motivator. He was unbelievable. I loved him. He was a great guy, great coach internationally. I mean, Bumgarner will swear by him. Gable will swear by him. I mean, he was the guru of wrestling internationally stuff, but just a great guy. I mean, I remember one time we were wrestling exchange. We were wrestling the Canadian team, and it was at Hersey High School. And they asked me, I was either I think I might have just been a freshman in college or a senior in high school. I can't remember. But he asked me, because it was during the summer, hey, could you wrestle, 149? I said, no, I'm up a weight. I'm a 36 pounder. I'm not going to go up a weight, Well, we need you to wrestle the 49 pounder from Canada. I said, no, I don't. If I'm going to wrestle, I don't want to wrestle up a weight. I'm not comfortable with that. So we hemmed and hawed, and I said, okay. They finally came back, and I wrestled 149. So Wick knew I was kind of nervous about that, because I never wrestled up a weight. I didn't like it, but at the same time, I said, okay, And Wick just got in my ear and said, hey, you're a racehorse. You're a racehorse. You're not a power horse. You're a racehorse. Just go out there and zip around, get the guy tired. And back then, it were 9-minute matches. There were 3-3-3. So I call that a man's match now, but they were 9-minute matches. And the guy I had he was a big 149 pounder. I'm going, oh my God. I'm going to kill these guys. I'm going to kill Bill from talking me into this. But he kept motivating me. And in between rounds, he had about a 45-second break in between the 3-minute rounds. And he was in my ear. Hey, you're a racehorse. You're a racehorse, you know. And I'm racing around all right. And I'm just trying to hit and pick the guy as much as I could. I ended up winning the match, you know. And so I just, you know, he was just he found a way to motivate you, even though you're either the underdog or your favorite, to still put your best foot forward. He was great. I really enjoyed him. He really was a lot of fun.
I recently did a documentary on Tony Davis, of all people, and you know, the wrestled for Northern Iowa, but his coach at Mount Carmel, obviously the great Bill Wick. And every time I bring up Bill Wick to any of those guys, they just start smiling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have another story. Here's this another true story. I just finished competing. I'm done. I retired. So now I'm going into the coaching aspect of it. I wanted to get to international stuff. So I was picked to be the head coach of a team going down to, oh God, we're somewhere in Guatemala or somewhere in there. I can't remember. Panama Open. It was called a Panama Open. And it was during all that drug stuff, and it was crazy. But we were going down there, and I had the team all picked out, and the USA Wrestling said, here's these guys going to meet you down there. I said, Bill's going to be my assistant. Bill Wick is going to be my assistant. I was the head coach, and Bill brought us an interpreter with him, who was a friend of his. And we go down there, and all of a sudden, everybody's arrived and stuff. We're counting heads. I said, we're missing 149 pounder. Where is he? Nobody knew. I said, who? So we called USA Wrestling, say, where is this guy? Blah, blah. He can't make it. He can't make the weight or whatever. I said, you gotta be kidding me. And we have a pretty good team, but the Cubans had a better team. We needed to have all 10 guys scoring points, or we would lose this thing. So Bill says, hey, Tim, how much are you over? I said, Bill, no, I'm not going to do it. I mean, we need to get somebody in here at 49. So Bill says, you've been working out. You're in pretty good shape. I said, that's beside the point. You know, I'm the head coach, you know, so he's going back and forth. He's getting on I'm going like, this is not going to go well. This is not going to go. I know sure enough, he talked me into, I weighed in with my clothes on. So I weighed in. So all the other competitors know I was the coach. I was the head coach, but I weighed in at 149, and I'm going like, oh, but this could be ugly, you know, because I didn't like to wrestle up a weight, you know, at all. So again, Bill did the same old thing. He got me going, you know. I ended up taking second. I got beat in the finals, but we won the championships because we had a full team, you know. Without having a full team, the Cubans would have beat us. So I'm going like, and the trophy he had was like 12 foot tall, you know. We had to literally take it apart to get it back home. I said, Bill, you're taking it home. It's not ours. I don't want it, you know. But it was great. He loved it. He just, you know, every time you're around him, there was always something positive happening.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's just a guy that guy alone could have his own documentary. The Bill Wick story.
You bet. Yep. There's a lot there.
And was was Fred Arkin, the Oak Park coach, was he at Iowa during this time, or was this before this time?
Yeah, he might have been there before. I'm not sure.
Okay. It might not even be Fred. I think I know one of the Oak Park coaches though. Oak Park River Forest. He was at Iowa.
Oh yeah. He's head coach there. What's his name? Parker. Norm Parker.
That's right. That's what I'm thinking of. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. He was there before I was there. He was there probably in the late 60s. Late 60s, like, yeah. Because my head coach at high school, Bill Fuller, was there in the early 60s, and I think Norm was just after that.
Now, when you were, and this is kind of going backwards, but when you were in high school, I always hear about this amazing team. Was it Leiden, like Chuck Farina? Like, what's that?
Yeah.
When was
Leiden,
that?
That was back then. Yeah, Leiden they were unbelievable. I mean, they would win state championships probably 2 or 3 years in a row. They were, again, that was one school. I mean, we only had single winners, no classifications back then. But Leiden was, they were always lights out. I mean, Waukegan was in the same boat. North Chicago, the Parker brothers at North Chicago, they were winning everything for a number of years too.
Mm.
But Leiden was traditionally very, very, very strong.
That's like when you've always coming up there. I know you always hear about this team, and it was, you just never really watched anything. I would say you didn't know, but like rumor has it was like 90 kids on a team, like just super deep, super very competitive team.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, like I said, they had a lot of success, and success breeds success, and they definitely did that.
Yeah. Now, when you get to Northwestern, you're there for 8 years as an assistant. You take the job, and your first year, you guys get a trophy. I was looking at the team picture before this interview. Was Ed Giese one of your assistants?
Yeah, he was there. Yeah.
Tell me about your first year, your memories going there and getting a trophy.
Well, I knew we'd come in. Tom Jarman, he's the one who brought me to Northwestern as assistant coach, and kind of showed me the ropes. He showed me a lot. I thought I knew a lot, but he showed me a lot more. And I'm fortunate, to get to be a head coach there. And we had a good group of guys. We had Brad Travaiola was on the team. Jack Griffin was on the team. We had a good team that most of the guys that Tom and I recruited. So we brought them in. And Tom was able, when he left the year before, he was going to be the athletic director and head wrestling coach at a Division III program, which he always loved doing. He loved it. I think that's where his heart was really in, Division III programs. He loved that kind of stuff.
But he left Northwestern to coach a D3 program.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And be an athletic director at that school too. Okay. So it was a twofer. And he did a great job. But yeah, my first year is just, we knew we had a pretty good team, and it's just a matter of, okay, got to manage these guys, keep them healthy, and just get them ready for Big Tens and nationals. And, and fortunately everything clicked, people won the right matches, and, we got to, it was nationals was in Maryland that year. And I remember the one match, the semifinal match, Jack Griffin was wrestling the Iowa State 125 punter, and he was a big, strong kid. And we kind of talked about what we wanted to do, or what he would think about trying to do and stay out of and stuff. But one thing I knew about Jack, he's kind of a riverboat gambler, and he was out there, he's wrestling, and all of a sudden he hit this kid, and I knew it. I saw it coming. He hit him with a headlock. And I said, it's too early. And in my mind, when he hit him with a headlock, he said, oh, he's going to get rolled through. This kid's too big and strong. He's going to roll him through. Jack hit him with the headlock and kept his hip flat and didn't get rolled through, kept him there and ended up pinning him. This was in the semifinals. Right of the way, I said, okay, we're sitting pretty good. So now he's in the finals with Zeke Jones.
Yes.
All right. And he and Zeke, I think Zeke, what if they wrestled once before and Zeke beat him? Maybe it was in Midlands. I'm trying to, I could be wrong on that. I'm sure Jack will tell me. But all I know is Zeke was number 1 seed. Jack was, 2 or 3 at the time. But Zeke had the pedigree. Zeke was favored to win the thing, And so Jack goes out there, and there's a move that Jack and I were working with Jack and a lot of guys on the team. It's called the seatbelt series. Chuck Yago used it all the time. He's a teammate of mine at Iowa. We were both team captains senior year, but Chuck uses what we call it a seatbelt series. And I taught Jack the seatbelt series, and Jack would use it every once in a while, And so he's wrestling Zeke. It's a pretty good match. All of a sudden, he gets in the seatbelt and he puts Zeke on his back, almost has him pinned, almost has him put him on his back for 5, 3 takedown plus 3. And, Zeke gets off his back, but, it's still a tough match. And then, Jack ends up winning the match and was a national champ. But that was a heck of a match between those two. And then Brad Travaiola wrestled the kid from Arizona State, St. John, lost a real close 1-point match. in the national finals. But everybody clicked. Guys we had there, we had like 6 or 7 qualifiers. Everybody contributed to get those team points. And before you know it, it's like all of a sudden I looked up, we ended up being 4th. I think we could beat Nebraska by a point. And Tim Newman was the head coach at that time, and we're pretty good friends. He says, he just shook his head, and is that close to a final? He wanted that 4th place too.
Right. But, I mean, to have an NCAA champion first year has got to be super memorable.
Yeah, it was. It is. Anytime you have an NCAA champ, I don't care if you're first year, 100th year, it's always memorable. Even having guys being All-Americans, it's just grueling. It's mm-hmm. something, you got to have a little luck every once in a while, but at the same time, you're earning it. That's for sure. It's not given to you.
And once you were in the head coaching position for, a decade, 15 years, what was it like to recruit at Northwestern? Were you targeting like Illinois heavily, or were you looking at kind of across the nation? Because I know it's a little bit unique being an academic powerhouse, but also in the best conference for wrestling in the country. So what were your targets?
Yeah, my target's I always loyal to Illinois. I wanted to keep the best Illinois kids in the state as I could. And then, but that limits you at Northwestern. I mean, you can only recruit certain type of academic standard kids. And so we knew that. We knew we couldn't get everybody, that we want. Because academics was always going to be the key there. And we respected that, and we went with that. So, but we want to go after the best Illinois kids that we could find that would fit fit our the parameters at Northwestern, mm-hmm. and our athletic parameters that I wanted to fill. So we found those guys and did the best we could. Did we get them all? No, not but we got quite our fair share. But we also go nationwide. We had to go to California. We had to go to Pennsylvania. I did a lot of recruiting out of Ohio, a lot of St. Ed's kids, that area. I did a lot of that just because it was far enough away from home for them, but yet close enough. Just like when I was going to college, I was just far enough away, but yet close enough. And it wasn't that different in, the feeling of it's still Midwest in a way. Yeah. So, but we get wherever we had to go to get a good kid, and that met our academics and our athletics priorities. We do it. We go after them.
2 kids that come to mind for me, when I was coming up, Brandon Preeson was a straight killer. I mean, he beat everybody. I mean, he was amazing. And then, at this time, you also get Ryan Lang, 4-time state champ from St. Ed's. I mean, that had to be, I think Ryan Lang was before Preeson, but that had to be a pretty massive signing.
Yeah, I mean, getting Ryan from St. Ed's 4-timer, I mean, and we were already dabbling in Ohio quite a bit by that time anyway. So we had a pretty good reputation, I think, recruiting out of Ohio and St. Ed's and stuff. And Ryan came along, and we fortunately was able to, recruit him, and he came to Northwestern, and he did a lot of winning for us, I tell you. He was probably, of all the athletes I had at Northwestern, he's probably one of the best athletes I've ever seen. And which means a lot because heck, we had a few other pretty good kids like Jake Herbert on that team, and Dustin Fox, even though he was a heavyweight, he was a heck of an athlete. But Ryan was, when it comes to athletics, he was very good. Preeson, super kid, worked hard, yes sir, no sir, all the time. Just did a great job, Jason Welch was in that kind of group also. He's from California, very talented. Yeah. So we were fortunate to get around those kind of guys.
And you mentioned Herbert. He's one of my favorite interviews ever. I love talking to that guy. And what a character, and what a just incredibly talented wrestler. I mean, you were there through the Askren finals, and then he redshirted a year. He was there for a long time with you guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He wrestled internationally for us too. I mean, made the Olympic team and stuff. No, he's everything you wanted. He's everything you wanted. It's kind of funny. He's a 4-time All-American, 3-time finalist, right? The only match he lost to Askren his sophomore year, and then he lost to oh man, who's the kid from Stanford he lost to in his freshman year? And he ended up taking third that year, but whatever. It was, he was,
Did he ever lose to Mark Perry, or did he beat Mark Perry every time? Because he went up that one year. Remember that?
Yeah, he beat Perry. He beat Perry. Yeah.
That was a bracket.
Yeah.
That was a hell of a bracket.
Yep.
That year Perry was up a weight. Oh my Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun. Actually, Perry he helped us win the fourth place trophy we got when it was in Detroit that year. Perry
07.
Perry was in the finals with the Okie State kid. Never beat him. Perry would always get beat by him. And I looked at one of the coaches. I said, "Hey, we were fifth by like a couple points." And we were ahead. We were fourth place by about a point or two. And I figured out, I looked at one of the coaches and said, "Well, hey, fifth, not bad." Knowing that Perry and the Okie State kid were going to wrestle in the finals, and Perry never beat him before. Never beat him. What's his name from Okie State?
Johnny Hendricks.
Yes. And Hendricks always beat him, and beat him easy every time, or at least from my perspective. Mm-hmm. So I said, that fifth place, not bad. We'll give, and I think Okie State, they had to win that match to hold on to the trophy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, but the odds are we're not going to win this thing, or Perry's going to get beat again. Sure enough, Perry's wrestling a heck of a match. Now he's riding him. I'm going, holy smokes, he's going to get riding time. Maybe, this is, I didn't want to get too crazy. So, sure enough, things work out. Perry rides him out, does whatever. He ends up winning. We ended up taking fourth. Okie State was fifth or sixth that year, So I'm going like, okay, great, we'll take it. We won it by like a half a point team, for fourth place. And that was a lot of fun.
I think it's just so important to focus on, because getting a team trophy is incredibly hard. And, one of my idols, Mark Johnson, he was at Illinois for a long time. They never got the trophy. And to this day, those guys talk about that. Like the year they won the Big Tens, that hurts all those guys. So, at Northwestern, another obviously Illinois D1 program, for you to get that trophy twice is just amazing to see that. And I'm sure you and Mark Johnson had some good duels over the years.
Mark and I are pretty good friends. He was out in Iowa when I was still just about the same time I was out there. He was one of the coaches on the staff then too. I left already, but Mark and I have known each other for a long time, and it was fun. I keep telling myself, well, would I like to win the Big Ten championship trophy or NCAA trophy? And then you try to think, well, both. I said, well, of course, both. You want them both, but which one do you want? I mean,
that is a good question. Which one do you trade? Yeah, that is a good question.
Which one's harder? Which one's harder to win? The Big Ten? Now, at that time, and still, I think the Big Ten trophy, it's getting tougher and tougher to win it every year or again. It's in NCAAs, you have 5 good guys, you can win the thing. If everything falls into place.
I really think back then too, no one was really like forfeiting out guys. Like now, Penn State might even concede a Big Ten title. They would never say that, but it's pretty obvious that they don't really care that much about winning that as much as they do the nationals, right? I don't think anyone was like forfeiting guys out back then.
No, I think we all, I think, I know in my situation, I always wanted to do the best in both, but it's like anything else. Ideally, I look, and it goes back to something else that we'll probably bring up. I look at Triple Crown of wrestling as Midlands, winning the Midlands championship, either in individual or a team or both, your conference championship, and the NCAAs. Mm-hmm. Those are like the Triple Crown. If I had to have a crown and have 3 things in there, I want to be known I won that, and that, either as an individual, as a coach.
Yeah.
That to me is the ultimate. That would be the coolest,
And to your point, 5-time Midlands champ yourself. And, I can't just say enough about how much the Midlands impacted me and how fun it was to go, and just, I'll never forget it. I mean, Joe Williams won eight times. And I think I was there that year. And so it's just so much fun going with my mom and watching those tournaments. You've been the tournament director for, upwards of 20 years. What does that role entail?
Oh boy, I tell you, it's I'm working on it it seems like right now I'm working on it every day, something, and I have a group of guys that help. We sit down and work on it. We try to meet every month and just go through what we need to finish, get done, and that kind of stuff. They've been helping me doing that for forever. Jack Lease is he's the old man of the sea of that. He's been great. He worked with Ken Kraft on that. He's still working with us on it. Jim Cartwright is one of the guys that work with us on that also. Fred Arkin, he's been helpful, very helpful. And we got Brad Treviola I got now on helping me out. So it's and there's a lot of other people involved. It's all volunteer. It's all volunteer. So it's a matter of just delegating as best you can, and that's one thing I like to be hands-on. So it's just a matter of letting loose every once in a while and say, okay, you guys got to handle it. I don't have time to do it, but it's a good tournament. Ken did a great job. He really he kind of showed me the way to how he ran the tournament, and whether I knew I was going to be involved in it down the road or not, it's something it just kind of evolved into. And I said, okay, I'm going to be the guy that's going to run it and improve on it and try to, that's one thing Ken did a nice job of all the time, is trying to do something different every year. Ken used to have different rules from the Midlands, not crazy ones, but something a little different. I remember one time he had a rule for Midlands. Okay, whoever got to the 15 points first won. So it's not like it's not like
what are the rules did he have? Do you remember?
What's that? Well, for example, that rule. Okay, for example, that rule. Let's say you're wrestling and it's 14. Let's say it's 10 to 13, whatever. All of a sudden, I get a takedown. I get to 15 points. I win. Next is over. It's 15 points. You get in a flurry. All of a sudden, you come out of it. I got my 15th point. You got 13. I win. You stop the match. That's it. It's kind of weird. Most of the matches didn't have that happen, but every once in a while, a kid, you win and it's over with. He did some other stuff with not weigh-ins, with riding time. He gave extra points for riding time. Then the NCAA stepped in and said, "Hey, listen, you guys can't do that anymore." So we had to go back to whatever the NCAA rules were and stay with that, which is fine. We don't have a problem with that. But
did they always allow open wrestlers to compete in it?
Yeah.
That was always the coolest part about it, right?
Yeah. It was always like when I wrestled in it out of college. That was the reason it helped me keep training, because the only thing we had to do internationally was Tbilisi, and that was until January, February, or Cerro Pilado, which was in I think February. So, but nowadays they have so much more international events they can go to. You don't necessarily have to use Midlands as a training tournament to keep yourself in the competitive end of it.
Yeah.
And it's a different style. It really is. I mean, I remember who was it? He was from Penn State. He wrestled in the Midlands, and he won it, but he was struggling big time because the shape was different. You got to get out. All that
David Taylor, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I remember that. Now you say that.
He won it. He won, but his final match or two, he struggled a little bit, just because you could tell it's a different type of discipline. Freestyle, you work your takedowns, but you don't have to be tough on. You don't have to worry about getting escapes. Or getting ridden out or stuff. So even though you had the background, but if you're not training for that, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, no, it really is. And it's just a cool element of it. And, as we wind down here, last question for you, Coach, is, a lot of times we'll ask people at the end of this podcast, how did wrestling change your life? But for you, I'd just like to know, like, why is the Midlands such a special tournament for you, and like hold it so close to your heart?
Well, I think the people I worked with, and the longevity of it, it's 59, 58 years we had it, and just the history behind it is unbelievable. The who's who in wrestling have won the tournament. There's been people who were Olympic champs or Olympic medalists never won the tournament, and it's always been run very well and very well respected, not just in the United States, but worldwide, internationally. It's a real special tournament. I've been fortunate to win it a few times. And we just want to keep it at the highest quality as it is all the time.
And what are the dates for this year coming up?
It's 29th, 30th, and we're going to have a women's division this year. That's going to be very exciting. That's going to be held on the 30th. So we have some great teams, typical, Midlands teams will be there. We'll have some clubs there. There'll be, have some open tournaments, open guys there. So, it's going to be fun. It's going to be at the Now Arena out in Hoffman Estates, December 29th, 30th. You can get tickets at Ticketmaster, or you can go to nowarena.com and order that way.
Love it. I think it's awesome. There's a women's division that's needed at every big tournament, in my opinion. I think it's just such a boost for wrestling to have that. So I think that's great. And I know we'll be there one or both of the days, and just can't wait. And just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast, Coach. It's been a lot of fun.
I appreciate it. And call me anytime.
Yes, sir. I will. I appreciate that. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. You bet. Thank you.